Hey everybody, it's Jim Johnson here, head coach at Contractor Coach Pro and your host with Contractor Radio. And we're doing this week's episode, super excited about it because we've got a special guest on here that I've been wanting to get on the show for quite some time. I've been watching him for years. I actually heard about him through a mutual friend about 4 years ago. And he's got a really cool story. Can't wait to share it with you guys. Before we get there, though, I want to remind you about the Contractor Strategy Conference coming up in December 1st, 8th, and 15th. It is an online virtual conference where we're going to not only help you think and strategize for your business, but help you put the tactical plan together. You can find out more at contractorstrategyconference.com. So without further ado, I want to bring on the owner of Roofing 101. And amazing guy, one of the most disciplined guys I've ever seen in this industry, Graham Desert. Welcome, buddy.
Hey, what's going on, Jim?
Oh man, just kind of getting everything organized and ready for you guys for you to hop on. And my lighting in here is weird. I don't know what's going on today. I
want to adjust my camera so I'm sitting and I'm centered so everybody can see my face.
There we go. Hey, centered, that's a good word for you. You're a pretty centered guy. I like that. Hey, tell us a little bit about Graham and kind of how you got here and kind of maybe a little bit of your background story. It's an interesting story. I think our audience would love to hear kind of, the trials and tribulations of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So where I am today, I reside in Carlsbad, California, married with 5 children. Married, 5 children, I'm a part owner now. I brought in some partners of Roofing 101, and we actually operate in multiple different markets, mainly on the western half of the country. I grew up in a large family of 10 kids. My father was in the military. We moved every 2 to 3 years, and growing up in a large family, there was a lot of things that I learned from my parents. That served me well today. And that, a lot of those lessons and things that I learned are actually implemented into our business and the foundation that we created, and the brand that we created. My father retired from the military. This was probably, I think the late 90s. And so he retired from the military, and we essentially stayed put in the Midwest. He retired from, he was an officer and whatnot. And so I went to high school in the Midwest, met my wife in the Midwest, had children in the Midwest, started my business in the Midwest. And, that's where we, pretty much grew up. And then, after a while, my wife and I just had this on our heart to move at some point. And, we've always wanted to do it. And I think the thing that was in our mind was, we're going to wait until our children get a little bit older. And, I was concerned that if we waited until our children were older, we wouldn't do it. We just get too comfortable because at that point, the business that I started, the roofing company was doing well. We were doing, $4 or $5 million consistently. I was the sole owner, very profitable. We were getting very comfortable in the community in which we were. My sister lived 2 doors down. My parents were in the same neighborhood. My in-laws were down the road. So it's very comfortable. We found a community that we really enjoyed. And, we're like, man, if we don't do this now, if we don't make the move now, we may not make the move. And so we made the decision to move. We didn't have any plans when we made that decision. We just made the decision, started telling people, and we set a deadline and, figured it out and made it happen. And then from there, we made the decision to expand the business. So
you're in California now, right? Like that's home base. Where at in California?
Carlsbad. So Carlsbad is in San Diego County. It's on the north end of San Diego County. It's a nice town, 200,000-300,000 people right on the beach. Love it.
So you brought on partners. So this is one of those things that's always a little bit scary because I always look at partnerships kind of like getting married, but worse. When you get married, you can get a divorce, you got kids and all this other stuff. But, we kind of tend to work it out over time for most people. But with a business partnership, boy, if we don't get along, and there's a divorce, man, that can get really sticky. So how did you go about like figuring out who you're going to have as partners? Why did you bring these particular folks in?
Well, there's three components to it, I believe. And number one, you have to be competent in what you're doing. So that was important. Number two, there has to be an alignment in values. There has to be an alignment in goals. And then the third one, well, that was character. So it's character, common goals, and competency. So they got to know what they're doing. You got to have common goals, like moving towards the right stuff, the right things, the common vision, and then you have to trust their character. So those three things are actually the components of trust. You can use that when trying to find a partner for life, or trying to find a business partner. And so when I've all three of my business partners, I've met in the past, and we've known each other for a little while. And when we sat down and came up with an agreement, we all, that component of trust was really important. The number one thing is trust and character. And so it's kind of hard to find out people's trust and character, or people's character, just by asking them, hey, do you have a good character? Like, of course, everybody's going to say, yeah. But part of it is just getting to know that person and understanding their life story, how they make decisions, what are their values? Because oftentimes our values are really determined, based upon the behavior of the individual, because that's what values are, is essentially a set of behaviors. And so me knowing them, I know what their values are, and I've communicated mine. We align in that area, and that was the number one thing. And then the second one was competency. Do they know what they're doing? And I'd answer, heck yeah, and all that. So
yeah, I think that's the one that most people are looking for first, is the competency. Can they bring whatever it is they're an expert at to the game?
Yeah.
In most cases they can, but if there's not this alignment on the character side of things and being headed in the same direction, it can get really, I've been through it. I've had several businesses. So
yeah. A lot of times, like when you find a mate, the first thing you're looking for is externally, like, what do they look like? Or are you attracted to that person? And a lot of time, there's a lot of attractive people out there. There's a lot of competent people out there. But on the flip side, when it hits the fan, and when you get into opposition, you get into tough times, how do they make decisions? And that's the important thing, because you're going to come across it. And I got to tell you, there's no year like a trying year like the last 9 months we've had, And so every partnership, every marriage is being tested right now.
Yeah, that you see a lot of these reports and stuff, and divorce is way up. People are like actually spending time together, and they're finding out that maybe that's a little bit more difficult than they thought. And some of these partnerships aren't really a partnership. It's almost like this symbiotic relationship where you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we'll get through it. But then when we start spending a bunch of time together, we start finding out that we're not all as aligned as we thought we were. It's kind of a sad story of this whole entire pandemic deal. So I always like to ask my guests a few questions. And so I'm going to ask you one, and I know for you, your wife and your kids, number one, ultimate, that's the thing. So I'm going to ask this in a way, what's your greatest achievement that doesn't involve wife, kids, like getting married and that kind of stuff, the family stuff? Because she knows she's number one, right? She knows that?
She's number two.
Okay, so God, and then I'm with you on that.
And I'm the same with her, man. Like she I get it, totally get it.
Yeah, it's the same with my wife and I. God first, then each other, then we got our kids number three there. Business is way down there actually for us. So, but your greatest achievement to date, not involving the family side of things, because that's kind of our obligatory answer.
Oh man, gosh. There's so, the biggest achievement that I feel like I've accomplished was really understanding my own personal power. And I don't I don't say that in a way of pride or putting myself above other people or above, our God or anything like that. But we're all made a certain way, and we're all made to thrive and be victorious in, what we pursue and in our path in life. And, I didn't really understand what that was all about until about 4 years ago. I signed up for this. It was a civilian-based Navy SEAL Hell Week simulation, essentially is what it was. And if you could just imagine 55 to 60 hours of, no sleep and just literally getting your face kicked in by, trained professionals, that was probably the greatest achievement. But in that process, I don't even really know how to explain it, but there was a time where, I wanted to quit, which is totally normal. I mean, you're getting your face kicked in. Everybody wants to quit when that happens. But I wanted to quit, and I knew I wasn't going to. But I ended up talking to one of my teammates. We were basically on our way up this mountain, and I just told him I was like, look, dude, I don't enjoy where I'm at. I don't like this. This sucks. My attitude sucks. I'm not going to quit. I want to, but I'm not going to. And I just need you to just tell me jokes and tell me stories for the next 4 hours. Cause literally we're just on our way up this mountain. It's going to be like a 10-mile trek, and 10 miles uphill for, a night. I was just not in the great mind space. And so, he did. And there were times where like literally people would put their hand on my back and push me up. Like they're right behind me and they're just walking and they're pushing me up. And then there'd be times where I would just grab somebody's shoulder, and just hang on, because I was just in that mindset of, not defeat or anything like that. It was just a total negative mindset. And so what ended up happening, we get to the top of the mountain, and at the top of the mountain, I had dinner. It was probably 11 o'clock at night or midnight or something like that. Had dinner and then felt totally replenished. And it was like this switch flipped. And I went from like the lowest moment to like the highest moment in a matter of 8 hours. So on our way down the mountain, we get down to the bottom, the sun starts coming up, we get transported to this lake, and we start doing these sprints. And, I made the commitment because I won one sprint. The first sprint I won, and it was all individual work, and I won. And then I made the commitment that I wasn't going to lose another one. And we just sprint after sprint. There's probably 20 or 30 sprints up this boat ramp. Like we're laying in water, and then they blow the whistle, and you run up to the top of the boat ramp and back, and whoever wins goes to go stand in the winner's circle. And so I won once, and I tasted the winner's circle one time, and I made the commitment I wasn't going to lose one sprint. And there was a point in time where the coach was testing me, and he would hold me back. He'd blow. Well, he actually didn't blow the whistle. What started the race was the phrase "pays to be a winner." So he'd say "it pays to be a winner," and then that was the cue to take off running. So he would say "pays to be a winner," and then he grabbed me and held me back and let everybody get like a 10-second head start. Yeah. And I still won the race, because it was just like this mentality of I am not going to lose. And that morning, as the sun was coming up and I was standing in the winner's circle, that is the most powerful moment of my entire life. And I felt the warmth of the sun come up over the mountains, and I'm just standing there absorbing it and just standing in victory. And that was the most powerful moment. And what's awesome about that, Jim, is I can literally access that moment at any point in time and take myself back and feel the power and the victory in that moment, and take that to anything that I do now.
That's absolutely amazing. First off, like this whole mountain climbing thing, I saw some of the pictures on Facebook. I'm like, man, that is pretty intense. And I'm kind of familiar with the program that you went through, at least a version of it. I've seen a variety of those, and they are intense. Have you always been like uber competitive like that?
I was an athlete in high school. Kind of grew up, playing sports. Played football in high school. Wrestled. Did weightlifting, competitive weightlifting. And then in college, I played football in college and took about a 10-year hiatus. Dropped last game of my senior year in college, I turned in my pads and was like, I never want to see weights or run a sprint ever again. Like, that was like what was going on up here. I'm like, I'm done with this crap. And then 10 years later, you look at, 10 years and, 5 kids later, I was looking in the mirror and I'm like, I got to do something, dude. These man boobs and this belly's got to go. And so, that all switched about 6 years ago. And then I didn't really know where to start. So I started doing group training, and this is my recommendation. If you ever want a place to start, it's finding a group of people that will show up consistently every day, early in the morning. And so I found a group, found a trainer that trained people in groups. And the reason why you choose a group is because you're committed to working out with someone and it becomes a team and they hold you accountable to showing up. And that's what you need to do, is show up. And the trainer basically gives you direction. So I did that for about 2 years, and then I got into CrossFit, and then, from there it was game over.
Yeah, you've been, ever since I've known of you, you're very dedicated and disciplined. That's the thing I kind of want to talk about today, is discipline, because there's not a guy that I see in this industry more disciplined to like this daily regimen of stuff. You do these things called murphs. Can you explain for the audience what a murph is and how that plays out? I think it's 365 days of this commitment that you've got going on. Is that right?
Yeah. So first off, a murph is it's what in the CrossFit world is called a hero WOD, or workout of the day. So there's first responders, military men and women that have died in combat or in service, and they have created workouts to commemorate or honor those people that have died, and they're called hero WODs. So Lieutenant Michael Murphy was part of that, and he has a hero WOD called a murph, and they actually made a movie called The Lone Survivor. So you guys, you've probably seen the movie, but Lieutenant Michael Murphy was, the SEAL that went up on top of the mountain to get the comms read so that they could, call in reinforcements. And so he got fired upon and was killed in action. So then they created this hero WOD. And now people do this every year as a challenge and as a way to memorialize and remember our fallen soldiers, especially Michael Murphy. So a murph, essentially the workout is running a mile, doing 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and running a mile, wearing a 20-pound weighted vest. That's what a murph is. So I've been doing that every single day since February 22nd. People have asked me like, hey man, why in the world would you do that? Like, what's the point? And a lot of it is to create discipline. And there's a lot that I've learned through this commitment of doing the workout. And the big thing is doing daily work. Doing something daily that's difficult actually creates discipline, creates the pattern, creates the habit, because we all have habits, we all have patterns that get created. There's patterns and habits that serve us, and there's patterns and habits that don't serve us. And the ones that don't serve us, you want to break those. I actually created a program to actually help people do that. But it's all just based on what I've learned in the last year or so. Over the last few years, but the patterns that do serve you, you just obviously you do more of that, but then the craziest thing about patterns and habits is that you do it so much and there's so much repetition that it's hard to undo it. One of my favorite quotes, and one of the things that I've learned, is that repetition is the mother of all skill. Until it is conditioned, then it becomes automatic, and all you have to do is press a button. And so now what I've learned through this process of doing a murph every day for the last 283 days, I think today was 283, is that it's all hard, and discipline is temporary, motivation is temporary, and there's just times where it's like you just don't want to do things, but it's so automatic and conditioned now that it doesn't matter what gets in the way, it's going to happen. I'll give you an example. I made the decision Saturday morning. We were in Mexico, and I made the decision, and we were in Mexico for a few days doing partner meetings or whatever. So I woke up Saturday morning in Mexico, and I made the decision, I'm not going to do my murph until I get home. Flight gets in at 4:20. We're going to grab some dinner, and then I'm going to go murph it up and then hang out with my wife or whatever. So we landed. I went and did the murph. It's not really convenient to do it after a day of travel, especially when you get home from vacation. Like, that's the last thing you want to do is work out. Yeah. But it's so conditioned and automatic that it's just like it's second nature. Here's another example. So yesterday was Sunday. I made the decision ahead of time. I'm going to do the murph after 9 o'clock. I'm going to spend a full day with my family. Now, I know, like, a full day with my family, and usually I'm winding down at 9 o'clock, and it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be fun, but I wanted that full day with my family. Sundays are really important to me. And I didn't really have a choice to work out or do the training early in the morning. So we did our church thing. I had this nutrition challenge that I was leading yesterday. I wrapped that up, did the grocery store, cooked dinner, sat down, watched the Chiefs game at 5:20. That lasted a long time, got done at like 8:30 or something like that. Well, I was on the couch sleeping through the second half of that game. I was tired. The last thing I wanted to do was wake up and go do a murph. But it's so automatic, and the pattern has been created. It doesn't take discipline anymore to do it, because discipline's temporary. Discipline will create freedom, right? And it's past that. It's past discipline. It's just happened. Now, the hard thing now is going to be on that 366th day, breaking the pattern of doing the murph. Does that make sense? So
I have a question about it, because I was thinking about that. Like any of these things that we do that are challenges like this, there's this 75 hard. I've seen that one, and there's all kinds of nutritional deals, a week long, 30 day, the whole 30 diet and that kind of stuff. That's the question. What happens on the 31st day or the 366th day? And is it something that you're just so conditioned to it that you're going to want to continue, you think?
Probably in a different way.
Yeah, it may not be quite the intensity, but you'll replace it with something else.
Yeah, I'll replace it with something else. And you have to so the thing is that if you don't make the decision ahead of time, you're going to be left to your own devices. And so in this case, if I don't make a decision ahead of time, guess what I'm doing on the 366th day? I'm doing another murph, because I'm conditioned that way. So for example, if you're doing 75 hard, if you don't decide what you're doing on the 76th day, you potentially could go back.
Well, I see that a lot with people that do the whole 75 hard thing. Chris Danielson, I don't know. Do you know him? He does a 75 hard. He never stopped. He just kept on going. He's still every day you see him, he posts his posts, and it's cool to see that. But I wonder how many people go, I'm done and I'm finished, and they just kind of go back to where they were before.
97%.
Yeah, I bet
maybe 98%.
I would venture to guess that's the case. It's like I got finished, and I tend to be that way. Like I'll set challenges for me, and I'll do those challenges, and whenever I get done with the challenge, I'm like, hey, I finished it. On to the next thing. But I usually replace it with something else.
We all do that. That's human nature. And a lot of it has to do with our belief structure. So one, it starts with your beliefs, which lead to our thoughts, which leads to our words, which leads to our actions, which lead to habits, which lead to values, which then tie back into new beliefs that are set. So That's like the magic formula, and you can dive into all those things, really deeply, and start to make changes. And if you make changes in one, it starts to affect everything else. So
is discipline something that people are hardwired for, or is it something anybody can learn?
Anybody can learn it.
What do you think brings it about? What's the thing that goes, okay, I know this thing's going to be hard, but I'm going to do it anyway?
It's your level of commitment and your level of focus. Like, I'll give you here's another example, and this is what I talk about with even my employees. But it's like we're all made and created to be, like I was saying earlier, victorious. So I'll just use an example of a lion, right? So we're all made to be a quote unquote lion, and if you think about it, the lion is one of the most powerful beings on the planet, one of the most powerful animals on the planet. And how do you tame a lion? Tame a lion with a stool, right? You see the lion tamers, in the circuses or whatever. They have a stool, right? So why does a lion get tamed by a stool? Well, because there's 3 legs and it doesn't know what to focus on. So because a lion can't focus, because it's got 3 legs to focus on, it gets tamed. And so that's what happens. A lack of focus and a lack of commitment is what keeps us from the discipline and creating the new habits. So anybody can get derailed.
I think pandemic derailed a lot of people. I mean, I was in the gym, even after my Achilles deal, I was in the gym still. It was still open. So I was going and doing what I could do. And then when they shut it down, it's like almost an excuse, right? It's like this excuse. Well, the gym's not open.
Oh, it's very convenient.
Yeah, that's where my routine is and the whole bit. Fortunately, I've done a reset and I've got a whole thing set up at my house now so I can get my workouts in. But so that's all discipline kind of in the realm of, fitness, nutrition. Seems to be a big passion for you, almost like that's maybe more important than the roofing business. Is that a fair statement?
Well, that's a great topic. We can talk about that. So this was brought up last year. I was asked this question that just kind of blew me away, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something here. And it's like 39 years old at the time, and you think you know everything, and you're on the path of like what you're supposed to be doing and all that. And so at our church, there's a group of entrepreneurs, and it's like this apprenticeship program, and there's probably about 15 of us. So we met every week, one night a week, every week for 6 months. And they brought in all these speakers, all these people to come in and talk, and super powerful. These speakers were awesome. Never would have thought, in a million years, a church function would be more powerful than most of the, coaching and development stuff that I see on the market, right? So I'm sitting there, and this gentleman's up in front of the class, and he's addressing us, and he's just like, "I have a question for you." I go, "Okay, cool. What?" And he kind of has a smile on his face, and he's like, "If you had all the money in the world, what would you do? If you had it," and he was like, "Just pick a number, not like $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, because, you and I both know we could spend a couple $1 million pretty quick,
Oh yeah.
Like $1 million is a lot of money, but it's really not that much money anymore. Right. So he's like, okay, so let's just say a couple billion. You are gifted a couple $1 billion. What are you going to do? After you bought the house, after you went on these vacations, and you went and visited the places you want to visit, and your bucket list is done, like what next? Because when that happens, like you're gonna get through that pretty quick, like in 2 or 3 years. So you're 39 years old now. Let's just say by the time you're 43, you still have billions of dollars in the bank. Like what are you gonna do with yourself? And I was like, oh, interesting. And I was like, you know what, dude? I would play music and I'd work out all the time. That's what I would do. I'd work out and I train because I love the feeling that I get from pressing myself, right, physically. And I love music. I like playing music. I love singing. That's how my wife and I met. And so I would do more of that. And that's really just using my creative brain space. I'm sort of a mechanic when it comes to things. I like to, get my hands dirty and do things, with my hands, which is the whole working out thing, and then also I love creativity, which is music. And so I think that I think everybody has that in them, and that's the desires of your heart. Everybody has a desire inside their heart, and we have a tendency as people to put an expiration date on that. Like if it doesn't happen by the time I'm 30, and I'm just going to let it go. Or if it doesn't happen by the time I'm 35, I'm just going to let it go. I'm 50 years old. I'm too old. It's too late for me. Or even you just flip that around. Like I was talking to some of my employees about this when we were creating vision boards. I'm like, listen, you're 21, 22 years old, and a lot of people look at you and say that you're not capable because you don't have the life experience behind you for you to get the results or do the things that you want to do. That's complete BS. Just because you're 21 or 22 doesn't automatically disqualify you from going after your heart's desires. And same thing as a 60-year-old, just because you're 60 doesn't mean it's too late. Just because you're 70 doesn't mean it's too late. Just because you're 40 doesn't mean your ship has sailed and your body's out of your prime, And then the other question is, if you think your prime is gone, and you're saying that for yourself physically, I'm past my prime. Well, what other areas does that bleed out into? Does that mean that you're past your prime spiritually? Does that mean you're past your prime, relationally? Does that mean you're past your prime mentally too? Because that's what happens because it all has to do with our thoughts and it bleeds into other things.
Your mind's a powerful thing, man. It is unbelievable. You really are what your thoughts are, and whatever you're thinking, whatever you're focusing on, whatever you're repeating to yourself often is usually what you will become. And so I do some daily affirmation stuff, those type of things to kind of keep my head above water. You said 50. You said 50. I'm like, crap. Okay. So I'm past that. Is that too old? No, it's not. I feel like I'm still just kind of starting. I got some big things that I want to do and accomplish in life. And they're kind of aligned with you, which is one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here today. So let's transition from the fitness and the nutrition and stuff, and let's talk about discipline and work. How do you apply the same thing to what you do business wise?
Great question. I think it comes down to planning and scheduling, making decisions ahead of time. Yeah.
So you've made these decisions that your business is going to be this thing, right? And because of that, you have to put in this hard work to make that happen. And that's really what discipline comes down to, for me at least, is I've decided something's going to happen, whether it's writing this book that I was after or doing this Contractor Coach Pro thing. Whenever I first started this was not hey, I want this thing to be big. It was just, I was going to coach a couple of guys and call it good. I'm kind of don't really have to work all that hard and that kind of stuff anymore. But then there was this day it all clicked. I went, this is a decision. Am I going to make that decision or not? Because once I make that decision, it's like this commitment, and there's going to be a lot of hard work involved. It has been for the last 7 years. It's been really difficult. And I'm not really at a place in my life where most people would think, hey, you want to take on something difficult? Let's go for it. By this time, people are going, hey, how do I make it easier? And my team, they notice it too. I'm constantly like pushing the envelope and pushing things forward, because I almost feel like the day that stops happening is the day I'm dead. Like I might as well just write it off at that point. But it usually comes down to a passion thing for me, that I'm after something that's really cool, but there's a lot of hard stuff that I got to do to get there. And I think that's that discipline part that people miss, is like the cool thing, that payoff. Like when you got off that mountain and you ran those sprints, that end with the warm sun, like that was the payoff for all that intensity and hard work.
Oh, dude, yeah. So good. Like I just remember that moment so vividly, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that feeling, and that's what I go back to.
So you were talking about your people. You're doing a vision board and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I'm big on asking people, why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you exist? Like if you were to die today, like you walk out of here and it's over, what have you done that mattered? Like what, and whether it's to just a few or many, what have you done? And I think a lot of people don't really think about that, right? I think a lot of people think about, what am I going to do this next day or this next week? They don't have this thing they're chasing, which I think when you have something that you're chasing, discipline gets a little bit more involved. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think it, the prior question had to do with how are you applying all this stuff to your work, and it comes down to commitment and focus, your level of commitment and your level of focus. And I have to admit, my level of focus, there's times when I'm not that focused, and I get derailed just like anybody else does, but the number one thing is not forgetting, like having that vision, and understanding what the end result you're working for, the end result that you're working for, that helps keep you focused and on track.
Yeah, it helps you go, okay, I'm going to get out of bed today at this time.
Yeah. And so for me, it's like the mission is do for others what they can't do for themselves. Make the world a better place, one person at a time. And I can do that through my work. I can do that through roofing.
That's why I like, as soon as we started talking, I was like, man, this guy and we see things the same way, because I feel this need, I can't even really describe it, but I want to help people. It's what our core values are based off of: love, serve, and care. And that's how we coach, and it's what we do. And if I can do that enough, I feel like I can have an impact. I feel like I can make a difference. And all that's through God. I don't have any control over He gives those opportunities or not. And so far, so good. Do you see it that way too? Like, these opportunities are put in front of you and you feel almost an obligation to do things the right way because of your spiritual background?
Yeah, it's really not up to me. Yeah, like if I get the message, hey, Graham, I want you to sell your business and I want you to go here and do this, I'm going to listen. That
happened to me 7 years ago.
Yeah,
I was at AccuLinks and I got the message that said, hey, resign. I didn't even know why. I was in a big prayerful moment, and only word I heard was resign, and I did the next day. Didn't know what I was going to do, and flew back home, and my grandfather went into the hospital for the next 3 months, and I got to spend his last 3 months with him.
Dude, that's so and you know what? You may not have been able to do that.
Yeah.
Had you stayed, and that's those are powerful moments. I tell you, the moments I spent with, the legacies of my family before they passed were very, very impactful. My grandfather, and I'll explain this real quick because it's on my vision board, and he just deeply impacted my life. I was 20 years old, and I come from a big family of 10 kids. So we're all there. He's a hospice care. He's at home. He's in bed. Like, he's got, the little oxygen stuff in his nose or whatever, the hoses. And, it just looks different than what I've ever seen him. But the guy was smiling and laughing. And my sister brought her son with him and introduced. It was just like, here's your great grandchild. And the look on his face was unbelievable. It was just like this overwhelming joy, and just peace. And I was like, you know what? Like, all this other stuff doesn't matter. What matters is, so then I just created this vision for myself. I want to see my grandchildren have children, and I'm going to take care of myself so much so that that'll happen. And then my wife's dad or grandfather, guy was like 80, like in his young 80s, and he's out in his front yard mowing his yard in his young 80s. And in Kansas City, it's not like you have small yards like we do here in California. I have a patch of grass for a front yard. It's like 6 foot by 8 foot, or whatever. It's not even a yard. But there, it's like a 10-acre yard, and the guy would mow his yard, and he's like 80 some odd years old. And I'd see that and I just get inspired. I'm like, man, when I'm 82 years old, I want to mow my yard,
If my kids don't get in a hurry, I might have some issue. That's a big reason for why I've kind of changed my health habits and stuff, is I wasn't really focused on that. And then I started going, hey, there's going to be grandkids. I want to be able to throw a football. I want to be able to throw a baseball with them. I want to be able to do those things. And hopefully someday they'll have kids. I want to actually try to do that at that point too. I might have to live to be 110, but my oldest is 30 and is the first kid that's going to be born, a grandkid. That's going to happen in April. So I didn't think I'd be all that excited about it, but I'm like super uber excited about it. It's really cool. And there is this thing, like, I feel almost this responsibility, like I gotta be that person like my grandpa was for me. He was that guiding force, that morality person in my life, that, man of your word, that kind of stuff. And it's always stuck with me. And like you, he had all the hoses and air and all that stuff hooked up to him. I don't picture him like that. Whenever I picture him, I don't see him as that. I see him as that guy with his arm around my shoulder and just kind of walking me along and telling me all the hard stuff that I don't really want to hear. But I look back today and it was really good advice. He was a good man. All right. So speaking of mentors in our lives, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten from a mentor?
Best piece of advice I ever got from a mentor. Gosh, let's see. Hold on. I journal and make notes, and I would say the best piece of advice is probably the piece of advice I get, the most recent piece of advice, which was this morning. Okay, so I will. Okay, so here's a couple of things. The busier we are looking at others' faults, the more likely we can't see our own. I wrote that down this morning. I was like, oh, I need to write that down. And I'll write down these thoughts and these things, and then those are topics that I can come back and write and journal and reflect on. So, and then here's another one that I wrote down. Peace doesn't exist without opposition. And so there's an example given, and I was listening to this book. It's called Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. One of the best books I've ever read or listened to. And this is probably the sixth time that I've listened to it in the last 6 or 7 months. Dude, if you haven't listened to it or read it, you gotta write it down, man. You have to. It's such a good book. But she's talking about this example. She's like, peace doesn't exist without opposition. People always have this vision of what peace looks like, and it's like completely still. And it's like, no, peace, that is not peace. What peace is essentially, it's like, and she started to paint this picture of this waterfall, this massive, huge waterfall, like Niagara Falls, right? And then there's this tree right by the waterfall, and then there's this branch that goes over it, and there's all this chaos around it. And then there's this bird's nest, and this bird sitting in this nest over this gnarly waterfall with lots of noise and chaos, and the bird is sitting there sleeping amongst the chaos. That's what peace is. And peace is being able to live and being able to exist and function in all the chaos.
That has been a really, everybody I think is talking about, what's been the impact of this whole pandemic and all that other good stuff. And really, I'm actually kind of surprised at myself. Normally anything like this, I would probably be a little bit weirded out by, and, a little anxiety and stuff like that. I haven't had any of that. It has just been like, hey, it is what it is. I'm good with God. I'm not going to really worry about this stuff. I still got to get up and do my thing the next day. Yeah. And that's been more rewarding, to be in that chaos and still calm. That, to me, that's what peace is. To be in that chaos, that everything whirling dervish around you, and you're still like, I've got this. We're good. Throw it at me, and it's okay. I can see that. That's really good. And that is some amazing advice. And finding that peace isn't easy. I think a lot of where that comes from is, at least for me as a spiritual person, it comes from my relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Also my relationship with me, being comfortable with who I am. Not trying to impress anybody, not worrying about what anybody else is doing, just being happy that I'm good enough. And that tends to give me a bit of peace whenever I go about my day. All right, last question. We're pushing that 45-minute mark here. So the last question. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I got to ask you something else, because we haven't talked about it and I don't want to miss it. You have started something new, and it kind of leads me into this question. I always ask this question about, we all only have so much time on this planet, right? And at the end, we'll be sitting in a box, and there'll be a bunch of people there, hopefully celebrating our lives. And what do we want them to think about us? And you've started this whole leadership thing for kids. Mm-hmm. Is that what you want your legacy to be, or is there more to it than that?
There's more to it than that, but it's certainly part of it. And I when this pandemic happened and the shutdown started happening, I'm sitting there with my kids. They're I have 5 children, 4 at home. One's out of the house and starting her life, and they're doing school online, and they'd get done in like an hour and a half, and then they'd sit around the rest of the day. And we did that for a couple of weeks, and I'm like, all right, enough of this. So I'm like, okay, what? Like, if my kids are experiencing this, there's kids across the world that are experiencing this, and parents, like, we're all kind of experiencing the same thing. Now parents are trying to figure out how to teach their kids, and it can be a mess. And so I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, so what can we do that's productive? So I literally went outside, and I'm just like standing in the sidewalk, and I'm like looking around, and I'm like, you know what? My boys need to go out and wash cars. They need to go out and wash cars. And so I taught them how to, start a car washing business, and, taught them how to go knock doors, taught them how to talk to customers, the scripts to use, what to charge, how to put together budgets, how to put together schedules, how to put together a plan, all that kind of stuff. The very next day they made $90. So within one day, they made $90. And then I thought to myself, like, man, this is great for them. This is fantastic. And then I'm like, well, this is an opportunity for all kids. And then I thought, well, this is a great way to actually redefine and define what leadership is for children and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship and leadership goes hand in hand. Like, there's no better way for kids to learn leadership lessons than to actually go out and start their own business with real people and real money and real experience. So I went hard at it. And within about a week and a half, I had about a 70 to 80 page workbook together with different exercises and things like that. Started filming videos. There's maybe 50, 60 videos together, and put together a course called Leaders Next Door. And essentially what it is to teach entrepreneurship to young kids, all the while teaching them about leadership, and then once they learn how to make money, what do you do with it? That's the big question. They want to go spend it, or, but you got to teach them how to spend. You got to teach them how to give. You got to teach them how to save. The big thing is generosity, but, I defined 17 different qualities of a leader. And so within that, it's the 17 different qualities of a leader next door. And then there's different things that they can learn, different ways that they can learn each quality. And one of them is generosity. It's something that's not really taught. So it's a big part of the legacy. And so, I made it for my children, but then, now it's taken to market. So we have this program now, and, I'm going to open it up here in a couple of weeks to start doing like a monthly subscription, different exercises that kids can do, because they may not want to be an entrepreneur. They may not want to go out and work in the neighborhood, and that's okay too. But, there's different things that parents can do to work with your kids to build them up as leaders growing up.
I think it's actually the most valuable skill we can teach our kids is the leadership skills. And there's all kinds of them, and it's cool. 17, I don't know what those 17 are. I'm sure I can probably guess quite a few of them off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. But, it's having that format to it, of realizing that there's this thing, like generosity being one of those things. Okay, now that I know that thing, what does that mean, and how do I do it? And you start to establish these habits that kids do. And at first, it's not easy for them. Like, I can remember my kids, earning money, raising money, and stuff like that. And that whole generosity part wasn't part of what they did. And so that's how we got involved with the church and really started to do some things there. That is the coolest legacy. When I heard about it, I reached out to you right away. I'm like, hey, however I can help you. I don't want anything for it. It's part of my passion, part of what I'm after with a little bit older crowd, because I think my worry is a little bit different. That I think kids today think one of two things. I've either got to get a college degree to make it, or if I don't get that, I'm going to work at Arby's or McDonald's. Mm-hmm. And that's not really the case. There's so much there's more opportunity on this planet today than there's ever been. Mm-hmm. figuring out what it is you want to do. And that's what I want to kind of help with, is the figuring out of what you want to do and walking them through that. We have a 5-step process to figuring out what your purpose is, and then how to turn that into actually something that's valuable to you and to other people. So that's kind of what I'm after. So when I heard your thing, I was like, dude, man, whatever I can do, you ask me, I'll do it. I think it's I think it's one of the coolest things I've ever heard of anybody in this industry being after.
Oh, that's great, man. I love it. Thank you. And where this all came from is I just got stirred up in my heart to inspire generosity in people. And then I was like, well, I'll just put a dollar amount to it, $1 billion. Okay, I'm going to inspire $1 billion in generosity. And then I was like, I was sitting there thinking, I've got to do that. So it's got to come from my own pocket. And I'm like, no, man, like the best way to do it is to inspire other people, right? So yeah, you can inspire adults, but it's a lot easier to inspire kids and to teach kids these principles, because then they'll have it the rest of their life. I mean, it's super hard to teach an adult generosity.
So you said it was part of the legacy you want. What's the legacy you want to leave behind? Like when people are there on that day, what do you want them to think about Graham?
It's good. I think what it oh man, such a good question. And it's like, I think you'll get a different answer just about any, because part of it has to do with, my vision board. But then I'm like, does my vision board matter? Does it? And like, I think at the end of the day, it goes back to the generosity piece, that I inspired so many people to be generous, and I inspired people to, be a better version of themselves. And how many people did I lead to live a better life, which ultimately leads to, our Lord. Right. Because I think at the end of the day, when we're judged, it's one of the things that we're going to be asked about. How many people did you bring to me?
Yeah, it's.
And it's not like you got to go out and, hey man, if you can go out and if you can bring thousands of people to God, great. But it's
I don't really approach it from this like coming to know God necessarily. Like that's obviously an important part, but this being able to find peace. I think that's what most people would really like to see, and not the peace like you were talking about, just everything's great. That in the chaos there's peace, and that's what I try to kind of focus on whenever I'm talking about it. It's a hard conversation to have. It's strange. It's a harder conversation to have in America than it is in just about any other country, because freedom, right? Like, hey, you don't push your stuff on me. And I don't do that. But when people are interested, I'm more than willing to have the conversation. And I think it's important. That's a cool legacy, man. Graham, I knew this was going to be a great interview. I had no doubt, and it was. You inspire me, just to let you know. Every time you put one of those Murph things on there, I'm like, oh, man, I really need to do this. But I know the commitments and responsibilities that I have, and I have to be able to say no sometimes. I'm pretty good at saying yes an awful lot, and so I got to keep a little balance for my wife and my family as well. But don't be surprised. There'll be a day where I go, all right, it's time. Let's go.
Yeah. That'd be. You know what? That's awesome. And I would say, and this just goes for anybody. Like, and this is just the last thing I'll say on it. But it's like set a goal, commit to it. Another strategy that I learned was write a letter to yourself describing what it's like to accomplish it. Right.
That's really good.
And so essentially what it would be like, let's just say it's me, for like one of my goals would be to buy oceanfront property. Right. So the day that I close on that house and I walk in, I'm writing a letter describing the feeling of what it's like to walk through that house and thanking myself for all the hard work that I did and for staying focused and for staying committed. I'm describing what the carpet feels like on my feet. I'm describing this, describing that. So you just go through it, right? And then that, one, you're visualizing it, and then two, you're speaking it in a way and you're writing it down. So you set the goal, make the commitment, write the letter, take an action step towards that goal. Because what happens, dude, is this. If you say, yes, I'm going to set a goal, but then the first action step is 2 months down the road, the likelihood of it happening drops off, right? So if that truly is a goal that you're willing to commit to, then take an action step as soon as you possibly can. And it doesn't have to be a crazy one. It's just a small one, because then what that does is that gets you that much closer towards, getting after it. So
I've always said the hardest step is the first one. Take the first one. The second one becomes easier. Third one even easier, and just keeps on going.
100%.
Graham, awesome interview. Thank you for taking this much time with us. I know it was a little longer than we had originally talked about, but I think it was great for our audience. It was great for me. You inspire me. You get me excited about doing things and getting all about life. And I wish you all the best with your passions as you pursue them.
Thank you, man. I've thoroughly enjoyed today. Appreciate it. And,
awesome.
Be chatting soon, Jim.
Yeah, anytime, man. Anytime you need me, you reach out. I'll be there.
You got it.
All right, guys. So that was Contractor Radio for this week. What a great interview. There was so much great stuff there. One of the things we like to do is we like to go back through those and pull out what we call the powerful moments as we go through there. And I have a feeling my team's going to have a lot of powerful moments to pull from that. And we'll share those with you guys in little short snippets. If you need help with your business, you need help in your life. It's what we do here at Contractor Coach Pro. We help folks get those things figured out. It doesn't cost you anything. You can go right to our website, fill out our free assessment, and we'll set up a free call with you. And we'll just talk about it and see what works for you. Thanks a lot for listening in to us here at Contractor Radio. We are here to love, serve, and care for you, and to give you those strategies and tactics that you need in your business to be successful. Today's strategy of being disciplined can't explain the power that has in your business, and we're thankful to Graham for joining us. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot. Have a great Thanksgiving. We have a lot to be thankful for, and we'll see you on our next episode of Contractor Radio.